So if you're a private social media platform in the US, you have rules. I consult for Facebook on this external review board that they're trying to create, so I've spent a lot of time looking at what they call their community standards. Most people never look at the community standards. Show of hands, how many people have a Facebook page? How many of you have ever looked at the community standards? What about Instagram? Hands up, who has Instagram? It's the same community standards, by the way, because as you know, Facebook owns Instagram. How many people have ever looked at the community standards? There you go. So, good for you. Unless you're looking at it because they took you down, in which case, maybe not so good for you. So, those are about 40 pages of rules that Facebook says it tries to follow in deciding what content they're going to post, they're going to allow to go up. And that's just on the question of whether they take it down or leave it up. That's not even touching the much more interesting and complicated question, which is how much is content promoted? Who actually is going to see what you post? That's obviously done by very complex algorithms that might include considerations other than just do other people engage with it. I mean, you sort of imagine that the algorithm is designed, if you post something that people are going to engage with, it'll give it to other people, because after all, the company makes a profit on you when you engage, because then you've got eyeballs there, and then they can sell your eyeballs to the advertisers. I mean, that's the whole business plan. That's not a secret. That's how it works. They're a business. And, you know, your eyeballs are the value that they have in their business, and they sell that to advertisers. So, but it turns out that that's not the only thing. They're not only asking about engagement. They have other criteria that they're thinking about, and over time, those criteria are coming to include, do they think the content is making the world a better place or not? Right? Should there be more news, or should there be more pictures of cute puppies? That's a genuine question that they're engaged with. And when they make a judgment as between that, they're not just saying, take it down or leave it up, which is the old-fashioned free speech question. They're asking a much more sophisticated question, how much should they promote this? So they're already doing this. And their rules for what you can say are a little tricky. But hate speech is out. Right? I think Dartmouth mentioned hate speech. So, you know, the US government under the First Amendment can't outlaw hate speech, if you want to say it outside of the school at least. Right? They can't. They can't pass a law saying it shall be unlawful to dehumanize another by comparing that person to a cockroach. I mean, it's funny, but I am taking the example of cockroach is a real example from the Rwandan genocide, when that's one of the things that Hutus said that Tutsis were. They compared them to cockroaches, and you know what you do with a cockroach, so you get this picture. So the US government lacks the authority under the First Amendment to ban that. But Twitter or Facebook, or for that matter YouTube, which by the way does all these same things, right, has its own system for taking down speech, all of those platforms are engaged in regularized judgments of what they're going to allow up or they're going to take down, not based on the absolutist First Amendment model. So speech that dehumanizes, hate speech, harmful speech. And then that lands you in a big debate about what's harmful speech. Right? So what about, you know, pro-anorexia speech? Should that be taken down because it could damage people who look at it and then are led toward anorexia? That's a form of harm. Or is it a form of free expression? What about just something that's not explicitly pro-anorexic but is encouraging people to diet and lose weight? It might contribute to body image disorders. On the other hand, it's part of ordinary expression. What about just pictures of anyone who, you know, has made himself or herself look especially good or bad? I mean, all of these questions are free speech questions. They're just not free speech questions in the US about the government. Right now here, they're free speech questions for the companies. In Europe, which I'll close on this point, in Europe, the governments are increasingly weighing in on these things. The European governments don't think, including in liberal democracies that have freedom of speech, the governments there don't believe that they shouldn't be able to regulate what's on social media. They're like, oh, no, no, we're going to do it. So Europe passed this thing called the GDPR, which is their privacy thing, which includes a right to be forgotten. Right? It's almost like a Snapchat-y thing at the national law level. Right? If you say, I want this information taken down about me, I was at this party, I don't want that to be on there when I apply for a job, you can go to the platform and you can say, take it down, even if it's not on your account. And they have to take it down under European law, just to give you one salient example. In the US, the government couldn't make Facebook do that, because Facebook could say, sorry, we have a free speech right to let that up or take it down. But in Europe, the governments are like, yeah, we can do that. And in this middle ground that in the US is being done by the platforms themselves, and in Europe is increasingly being done by the governments, is where most free speech for most of your lives is going to be. I mean, I don't want to say for most of your lives. I mean, there will be something after social media. Right? I mean, I'm old enough that I remember it before there was social media. And people had a different view about what the internet was going to be like. They thought the entire internet was, it was even before Google. They're like, the internet is just a massive space of freedom. Everyone says whatever they want. And it turned out that that's not the way the internet in fact works. Because people like to be on one network and be able to communicate with each other, and that means they need a centralized platform, and if they need a centralized platform, they're in a platform that's regulated by the platform. So what my takeaway from this for you guys is that we're in a global struggle for what the freedom of speech is going to look like in your lifetimes, in a way that a kind of struggle that hasn't existed in the last 75 or 100 years in the world. There are these three models, roughly speaking, that are out there, and different places around the world are going to try out different versions of them. And even in the US, your classic freedom of speech, the country with historically the greatest freedom of speech in the world, you don't have the freedom of speech that you once had, because it's not that the government's going to take it away. The government will protect it. It's that the platforms are in the process of limiting your speech in a whole bunch of ways, many of which are great, but all of which call into question the core idea that you could express any idea that you want.